Top of the morning to you. This is Alaric LaBrie with Invisionary, coming at you live from sunny South Florida, where it is actually cold enough to wear a leather jacket today. I've got my coffee, and figured I would do a first day blog video update. Absolutely blown away by the initial response we've received so far. I mean, wow. Thank you very much, everybody. I mean, for our first day with absolutely no media coverage so far, we've raised over $1,000 for Kickstarter campaigns. That's pretty impressive from everything I've seen. A lot of the times these campaigns don't really get much exposure or support for easily the first week or two. So to see this going so quickly and doing so well is absolutely humbling. So I just wanted to say, huge thanks to everybody who has contributed so far. Just want to go ahead and give a quick shout out. Big thanks to Becky Walker, our very first campaign contributor, Craig O'Neill, Vaz, Martin Znimirowski, sorry if I butchered your name, Winter Wunsch, Wayne G, Disoriented Effigy, Joshua Johnson, Carlos Macera, Jonas Atterbring, The Pink Ninja, Justin Stansel, William Cooper, or Cupper, not sure on that one, apologize if I've said it wrong, Argare, not sure if I said that correctly either, KRM398, Mark Quayle, Emmanuel Casenes, Max Kelly, and Tor Andre Kill Makavold. Thank you guys so much for your contributions. You have made a huge impact and got everybody here at Invisionary extremely excited. Also, a big shout out to JD Games over in the United Kingdom and Europe. Appreciate what you're doing for us over there. Some pretty exciting news I got this morning. Look forward to working more with you in the future. I just wanted to start out by saying, we've discussed it, and as a result of how absolutely wonderful this first day has been, we decided that we're going to give a special reward to all of our early backers here. Everybody who has contributed so far, what we're doing is we're going to increase your reward value by 1. So whatever you spent, whatever it is that you end up spending by the time this is done, you're going to get a +1. So if we end up hitting our tier 7 goal, which, it's pretty lofty, but hey, marketing is an expensive thing, so we figured we would be very thorough with our goals. You never know exactly how big something's going to blow up. But if we end up reaching our tier 7 goal, you'll end up getting a +8 instead of a +7. And we're going to extend this +1 reward for our early adopters all the way till the end of the 20th. So that's roughly 48 hours from now. So our first 3 days, anyone who backs our project in that time period will automatically have their reward value increased by 1, regardless of how high up we go, as long as we meet our basic goal. So, if we reach our 100,000, which means we become a funded project, you'll end up with a +2. That's basically, we're gamers. That's why we're here, and we understand, exactly how important the relationship is between a developer and their fans. And you guys have jumped out there on the line for us on the very beginning. For even a single magazine has given us hide or hair on their mention or an interview or anything. You guys have jumped on this and given us your support. So we are going to basically give you this as a reward for our way of saying thank you, because we can't do this without you, and we absolutely just appreciate what you've done so far, and we look forward to every last bit of what's in store in the future. So having said that, I want to just take a little bit of time and talk about why Praetoria? Why this particular idea for a game? What's the motivating forces behind it? And what I'm most excited about as the game director and the founder of this project. Before I do that, I want to quickly ask all of you guys to bug the various developers here. You can do that in the forums or in the comments section of the Kickstarter page. But, bug Gareth and Frank and Adrian and Mark and Syrian and any of the rest of the guys to jump on their video cameras and to, give some kind of a blog update. Some of them are a little camera shy. Everybody's hard at work, got nose deep in code, as they say. But, I want them to come up for air and, talk to you guys and, help me encourage them to get on camera. Because you guys could probably get better results out of it on this particular part than I can right now. They're really driven and motivated. They're all excited, but yeah, tell them you want to hear from them, and hopefully we'll see some interesting and fun videos from them in the coming days. But anyway, having said that, what is the motivating force behind Praetoria? This is not just some little, idea. It's not a minor concept in the grand scheme of things. This is the better part of my life of design and coming up with systems and playing games and reading forums and reading game suggestions. Just a little bit background about me personally. I started playing games on the Tandy 1000 and the Mac Plus. We're talking monochrome. Some of you guys are too young to even know what monochrome are, but basically we're talking, like one of the first games I ever played was Artillery, which was on what was it? Commodore 64. You essentially controlled a little carrot. You know what a system carrot is, where you looks like I guess the closest thing on the keyboard now would be if you hit Shift 6, that little arrow up, and you basically fired a block or a star. I think it was an asterisk at a box on the other side of the screen, and all you did is choose what angle and how much power, and it would shoot this little ball over and a little asterisk over, and it would blow up the box if you got close enough. And we're talking long time ago games, and I've seen games go all the way through. I mean, the Atari, the ColecoVision, the Intellivision, the Nintendo, all the way up. I've always been a PC gamer predominantly, but in the early years, those consoles really had some amazing games. Played games like Civilization, Sims, Lords of Conquest, Prince of Persia, Space Quest, King's Quest, Police Quest. If I tried to list every game I ever played, I would be here until next week. But I'm a hardcore gamer. Actually, every member of this team is a hardcore gamer. There's not one person in Invisionary who is in this for the money. Every single person in the company is in this for the love. Every last one of them is an avid, hardcore, lifelong gamer. And I think that's one of the things that kind of sets us apart from the average development company. We've all, each of us individually has had opportunities to essentially sell out, if you would, to a bigger company or something to develop our project with them. Like for me personally, I can speak. I was offered roughly $400,000 to start this project about 8 years ago. But if you know anything about the way risk venture capitalist situations work, they'll say, okay, we'll give you this much money and you'll be able to get your project started. But they essentially want control. They want, they wanted 51% or more. I've had a couple different people offer me between $100,000 and $500,000 to start this, and I've turned them all down. And I said, thank you, I appreciate the interest, but no, you want too much, because they wanted controlling interest in the project. They wanted to be able to call the shots. They wanted to be able to basically take over and change it to suit their whims. And as a gamer, that just goes against everything that I believe in. I've seen more than once some really great gaming companies, come out of, the woodworks, make some fantastic games, and then get bought up and make crap from that point on. Just like, every game they released after they got bought out was just like, whoa, is this even the same company? What's going on here? So, one of the things that, I can say about Invisionary is we're an artist-owned and operated company, and as long as we have your support, we will always remain that way. Like I said, we're not in this for the money. We're in this for the love. Money is good. The more the merrier. It just means we get to do more cool stuff. be able to, not have to worry about scraping by, but, no more starving artist kind of deal, right? But, the reality is, as long as we have the backing, Invisionary will always remain artist owned and operated. Um, I personally, I know that several members of the team have their own pet projects. This one happens to be mine, but I kind of got things going. But even when we start developing additional games and adding things to our rapport over the, the next decades, whatever, I personally will never stop working on this game. This is going to be my pet project until there's virtual reality and you're actually jacking into some kind of holo deck, virtual heads-up display. Oculus Rift is cool, but I mean like really virtual reality level of game. In my opinion, this game needs to exist from technology now that it's actually capable of being produced. Using voxels and 64-bit, we can actually realize this vision, but I plan to keep developing it all the way to that point in time. And so long as we have your backing and people's, playing the game and enjoying it and it's making money, we'll keep developing it all the way into the future. I don't ever foresee there coming a day to where we say, okay, we've done all we can on the series, let's kind of put it on the back burner. Even if we develop additional projects, this is always going to be my baby. This is going to be the one that I work on exclusively or predominantly until the cows come home. The idea of what this game embodies, what it symbolizes, is more than just, telling a story. Now, I'm all about storytelling, and I love writing stories. I've written quite a few, screenplays and my own kind of movies and, things like that over the years. But, what, as a gamer, I always wanted was to be able to go beyond the lines of what the developer saw. And, as a sci-fi fan, I like sci-fi and fantasy, but I call myself a sci-fi fan because that's where my main love is. There's a big philosophical difference between fantasy games and sci-fi games, just like fantasy movies and sci-fi movies. In your typical fantasy, you have a situation where the character has some kind of an event that occurs. Something, big that happens in their life that spawns the story and makes it so that they have to go out and actually, gather up, team members, the wizard, the strong guy, whatever. And they embark on a quest, and that quest is to slay the dragon, kill bad guy, whatever. That's very different than sci-fi. In sci-fi, if you look at, good God, from Dune all the way to Warhammer 40K, we're talking about the novel series as much as the tabletop, Blade Runner, Star Wars, Star Trek, you can go right down the list, Firefly, whatever, all these different wonderful sci-fi movies, Alien, Predator, you name it. They all have something in common, but none of them are alike. You can't say, well, they all have a similar starting point, they have a similar middle, they have a similar ending. They're completely night and day to each other. They're so completely different. It's been one of those things where I think the executive types who say we're going to make a sci-fi game don't really understand what it is that makes those games, or excuse me, those series, those movies, truly sci-fi. So they'll take and they'll apply a fantasy principle to a sci-fi game. Essentially, what they're doing is they're reskinning fantasy into sci-fi. And by what I mean by that is, if you look at most sci-fi games, they're presented much in the same way as a fantasy game is presented. The difference is you're using a guy with a gun rather than a guy with a sword, but you're still going on quests, and you're still, essentially the do-boy, the gopher of this storyline, and have some kind of big evil thing or whatever that you have to go against, and that's kind of the basis of it. And sometimes that works. Like for example, if you look at like the Mass Effect series, that's they had a great story, right up until the end. Unfortunately, I didn't really like the ending, but hey, some people do. But that games like, for example, Wasteland and Fallout, and some of those really old games really did have some really cool elements to it. Player choice, decision making. I have a background in tabletop RPGs. I know it wasn't exactly cool to brag about, but hey, me and my buddies, we were pretty cool. At the same time, we were total tabletop gamers, Rifts, and just all the Warhammer 40K and all the old classics. So I have a background in that as well. And to me, what signified a role-playing game differently than a different kind of game wasn't the experience points, it wasn't the levels. That was kind of like, the time-consuming part of it. The oh, okay, you did this, you get better roles in the future. It was the fact that in a tabletop environment, anything's possible. You have a character, you have guidelines, but those systems were based around papers. Imagine if every single time you used a skill, you had to augment your stats. It would have become cumbersome. So classes and levels and experience points made sense back then. However, here we are, we're now in 2014. We're talking about a completely different environment. We're talking about digital gaming, digital storytelling, digital, sci-fi. And those systems, to me personally, are counterintuitive or work against the concept of multiplayer because they limit the player. They divide the players. They make it so that player A can't play with player B because they're different levels, they're different quests, and all these different mechanics that are working against them to actually be able to say, hey, let's go team up and go do something. So that's actually the single most important element of this. We've said it that this game is designed from day one around PvP, but it's also designed from day one around multiplayer. Not just player versus player, but cooperative. Pardon me 1 second here. I'm going to light up a fresh cigarette. I'm chain smoking, but I'm excited. We've had a great first day, and I want to talk to you guys, so you have to forgive me. I'm going to drink some coffee, light up another cigarette, and keep going here. Basically, growing up, I have a younger brother, Sean, who's also a very, very, very gifted and talented programmer who has released his own game recently, and he's working with us on this project now. He's an AI guy and very, very brilliant. But when we were growing up, we loved cooperative stuff. There were some games that came out with cooperative modes. And whenever that happened, we would play those games into infinity. We weren't really that competitive with each other. We liked to work together. So as growing up with that environment and understanding that cooperative gameplay is really, really fun. I also have a starch background in PvP. I have been PvPing games since the old days, since MMOs, and actually before MMOs, it was just single first-person shooter games like Counter-Strike. I did a little bit of professional gaming back in the day. I was Dead Man Walking back in Counter-Strike, and we did quite a bit of competitive gaming and actually got kind of high up in the ladders. It was a lot of fun. I've always loved PvP. It's like one of the most engaging parts of gaming. So when we decided that we were going to make this game, Praetoria, we decided, what elements are most important was cooperative and competitive. And so that is some of what has fueled our decisions in which direction we've gone with it. Making sure, for example, there's no levels, there's no classes. Empires are not exclusive to a single player. They're cooperative. For those of you who've actually looked at our project and looked at our Anatomy of an Empire, you realize that we have created player-made factions that will actually allow for massive guilds with, hundreds of players, maybe even thousands of members, to create their own civilization and all work together toward a common goal, cooperatively. And then cooperatively, they will compete against other guilds, other civilizations, who are doing the exact same thing, developing technology the way they see fit, creating their own kinds of vehicles, creating their own kinds of weapons, fielding their units. And to us, that is one of the things that just I think is missing from a lot of games. If you look at almost every game out there, there's essentially maybe 2, 3, if you're lucky, sometimes more, but rarely ever more than 2 to 3 factions. And those factions are completely set in stone. You have no control over it. You do not call the shots. They have NPCs in it. Those NPCs are the leaders. They're usually just quest givers. Big shout out to Funcom and Anarchy Online. They're one of the only game companies out there that actually took role play and made it something that was meaningful. Even though they had locked factions and you could never be a leader in the faction, they had the Omnitech, what was it called? Omnitech Board of Directors, and they had the Clans Council of Truth, and I forget what the neutrals was. It was the neutrals, I think, not board of directors, it was like managers or city managers, because they had different cities for the neutrals. But they actually took these non-player characters and had what's called the ARC program, where players would and developers would actually take over control of these characters and push the story forward, which then would actually cause events to occur in the game. And for example, Borealis changed hands multiple times through the course of the story. Even Athens, one of the main cities for the clans, was originally an Omnitech city. So big kudos to Funcom for taking and pushing storytelling and cooperative storytelling farther than any other company I've seen since then has done. But in the end, even in that game, the players, even though they participated in the decision making, the ultimate decision was always the developers. The final say-so, the final changes, if you wanted to make the city change hands, the developers had to actually go in and program and change the guard NPCs and do this kind of stuff. So when we decided to develop this game, we wanted to make it to where the players control the factions right from day one. There is no NPC overlord, there is no ruler. The guild leader, is essentially the ruler of the empire, or the guild council, whatever. And in that, they would have, they would break up their guild into its individual categories. You would have your PvPers, who would be your main combat-oriented individuals. You've got your trade skillers, who are your people who, are all about the farming, crafting, all that kind of stuff. And then you've got your role players, and then you've got your artists, people who may even play games like Second Life, for example, which is just a giant artist community. And then you've got, just a mixture of people in these other games that actually are all essentially doing their own thing. And sometimes they overlap, sometimes they can help each other, but it's not really cooperative. It's more, oh yeah, hey, I've got such and such level in a crafting skill, so I can make you something. Oh, that's cool, whatever. Well, in our game, we wanted to make it so that it all works together. It's all integrated into the whole. The leaders can create contracts that will say, hey, let's develop this kind of technology, and then reward the players, the members of the empire, for developing technology and meeting the goals with empire ranks, and make it so that the people who are the politicians, the role players, whatever, who want to do ambassadors and forge alliances with other empires, all these people can work together, and everybody has essentially an equal worth. The people who are combatants, the guys who are your absolute hardcore PvPers, aren't necessarily more important than a role player, which in most games isn't the case. I mean, I hate to say it, but role players have got a pretty bad rep in games lately, because there's no real room for them. There's no real reason. I mean, they exist, they do their own thing, but games are so restrictive in what a player has to do to stay competitive. They have to grind the XP, they have to farm the levels, they have to farm the gear to stay competitive. A role player is almost always outclassed because they're doing the storytelling, the cooperative storytelling stuff. And we wanted to make it so that a role player is every bit as useful to the whole as a hardcore PvPer. When I started PvPing and I started role-playing years ago, role players were the PvPers. Slowly over time, as more and more grinding got added into the game environment, role players fell out of the PvP because hardcore gamers came in, who were, stat guys, the guys who were going to say, oh, how can I min-max my character to the ultimate and make essentially a twink? And once that started happening, players who role-played dropped out of the PvP because they didn't spend as much time, and therefore they could not stand on equal footing. In our game design, let's say that you just start the game. You've never played before. You just got your friend just said, hey, I'm playing this game, you should come check it out. and you start the game, if that friend is a member of an empire, has, they've cooperatively developed this technology, they sent it off to factories, they developed it, whatever, they equip that new player with gear, that new player is on equal footing with everybody else. They're not like, oh, well, I got to play the game for 6 years before I can actually be useful, like something like Eve. Love so many different elements of Eve, but whoever plays the game longest wins. In almost all cases, it's not really a player skill thing, it's a who's played longer thing. And to me, that's counterintuitive. That's a blockade between player and game, player and other players. So to make a game that's very cooperative and very competitive, we've tried to design systems that are specifically geared around that concept from the ground up. Technology trees and people who are into crafting will be every bit as important as somebody who's out there using the technology. I have this theory. It's called nodes of interaction or points of interaction. And you say, when you play a game, how many different ways can you interact with the world around you? And, if you count it up, for the most part, it's, okay, I can attack this object, and if it's a quest item, I can double click it. And that's about the gist of it. That's about as far as it goes. So, we've basically analyzed, where a budget goes in a game's development, and a lot of it is quests. A lot of it is what we call one-shot content, single use. It's used one time, it's seen one time, and then it's never seen again. A zone where, you need that zone to get from level 1 to level 5, and then once you hit level 5, you say, hey, I'm out of this zone and never go back until I roll another alt. That makes that zone essentially a ghost town, except for new players. And, as the game progresses and the levels get higher, things get more and more thinned out because people get spread out over a greater distance. And it becomes less and less multiplayer the farther you get into the game. And then you say, okay, well, there's raids. And okay, raids are kind of cool. I've done quite a bit of raiding in various games, I'm not going to be too proud to say I've played WoW. I've raided in WoW. I know what's up. I've been there, done it, seen it, got the t-shirt. There's something enjoyable about it, but at the same time, that's not what I consider multiplayer. It's like, do you know the proper moves to, stand in this, move over here when this happens, and if you don't, you die. And that's kind of, to me, that's not the same level of what I consider multiplayer. So, the game as a whole, as a philosophical difference, to be a true sci-fi, had to break away from a lot of these, what are considered tried and true or time-tested or, marketable, proven systems, and say, let's just toss almost all of them out the window. Since we're an independent developer, we can do that. A AAA company, they can't. They have a board of directors who says, this is proven. It's been selling this way for the last 10 years. We're not going to change it because that's the way it works and that's the way this genre is. And this genre is these particular features. And if these features aren't present, then it doesn't get sold, and so on and so forth. So, that's one of the cool things about Kickstarter is, we don't have to compromise our beliefs and design what someone else says we should do. We can say, what have we experienced? What do we enjoy? What do we think would make a great game? And go forward from there. And, this team is just an amazing group of people, very talented, and put together our heads to come up with systems that, while they may be very much unlike anything before it, there's a lot of different core elements from many different genres all tied together in one idea. We've got the first-person shooter and MMORPG style of combat, which is the RAE, Ready, Action, Execute, MMO style, and RAF, Ready, Aim, Fire, first-person, third-person style of combat, which is oriented around sub-target locations, shooting the head, shooting the body, shooting the arm, shooting the legs, and giving people a semi-real-time way of doing that doesn't use physics and doesn't bog down the server, allows for massively multiplayer combat. And then we've got the simulation side of things, flight simulation and character simulation, like, for example, The Sims, which, absolutely fantastic series for what it is. But you know, that concept of characters having a life of their own, of growing old, of aging, of reproducing, of being able to get married and be a living being within the world is something that's not in almost any game outside of that one genre, simulations. So you have, you know, mixing the combat style of controlling a unit with from that perspective of being physically first or third person and interacting with the world around them, plus the living, breathing world element and the flight simulation style controls. Add that in with now a real-time strategy game. You know, I've been talking about cooperative and competitive. Real-time strategy games typically only it's one person versus another person versus another person. You know, maybe you have 5 people in a server doing a round in a lobby-style combat. Whoever, you know, is last man standing wins. Maybe it's story-driven, whatever. But I've never seen a cooperative real-time strategy where multiple people are all working toward the same goals. So we've tied that element in as well with this. And that's one of the things that really gets me excited about this game design and Praetoria as a whole, is we're tying some of the best features of some of the most popular and time-tested genres together in a way that's never been even attempted before. And the cool part is we've designed the systems in a way that's actually extremely accomplishable. Very, 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 very doable. This is not like a far-fetched concept like, oh, you guys will never be able to make that game. And believe me, I've heard it. But when I break it down and say, no, look, this is actually how we're doing it and explain it, people are like, oh, wow. Oh, so you mean you can actually do that? Yes, we actually can. It's where we're spending our time, where we're spending our money in terms of development. We're not producing a bunch of one-off content. We're not filling out 5,000 different, you know, player quests and creating tons and tons of single-use objects and useless filler junk. We're creating player content creation tools, cooperative management options for Empire, for commanders. So for the back to the real-time strategy for a moment, commanders, let's say, you know, you have your empire, you have your leadership, and they assign their war generals, their admirals, whatever they want to call it. They call it a Deathbringer and attach a certain set of permissions to it, which essentially makes it an admiral or a general, you know, your ships versus your ground troops. That person then has a command interface to issue orders to the players and the AI, these living beings within the game world, to go places, accomplish objectives, and so on and so forth. And then the actual players who are in the characters who are going to be receiving those orders and executing them. And creating a system where even the general, after, you know, if they are in a position where they don't need to babysit every last element, they set things in motion and they want to go jump into the action too, they can hot swap between their general in, you know, back on some home base using a command interface to a foot soldier on the ground running through a trench and helping execute the plan. You know, but in a big guild where there's tons and tons of people, I guarantee you will see players who are absolutely, all they do is run the campaigns from a RTS-style command interface. And then there will be other players who are piloting these spaceships, whether it's monolithic size, you know, carriers and cruisers and destroyers and you know, heavy cruisers, frigates, down to your interceptors, bombers, fighters, and all these different, you know, types of spaceship, and the people who are on the ground in the trenches and drop ships and individual, you know, trench type combat. You know, I grew up watching anime as well, so you guarantee there's going to be mechanized standing tanks in this game. Think about that for a moment. You'll have these people who are actually piloting all these different kinds of vehicles in real time as the commander's issuing the orders. To me, that is just amazing. That's like, that is the bread and butter. That's the meat and potatoes. That's like, wow, you know, this is going to create combat that's so cool. You know, the one thing I've never seen in a game is the ability to actually perform an orbital strike from space. So, you know, like look for example, you know, things like the Death Star, right? You know, okay, the Death Star got blown up in Star Wars, but let's be realistic. If someone actually built the Death Star, the chances of there being this ultimate weakness and whatever, if they design it right, it's probably not going to be there. Mind you, it's going to be expensive as hell to make, a planet-killing spaceship type, space station thing. This is going to be costly to maintain, and you're going to have to field a ton of units to protect it. But why not? Why not actually allow players to create their own Death Star and fly it across the universe and actually go blow up entire planets? Why not? In a traditional game, you can't do that. That's just that totally breaks with the concept of how their games are designed. So we've decided to take this from the perspective of allowing that, of saying the risk versus reward, the cost versus the effect is the balancing factors. Things age, they die. It's going to happen. There will be civilizations that exist for years and then suddenly get wiped out. And because we have an account system, so for those of you who go, wait a minute, I just realized this. There's going to be permadeath in this game. Wow. What we have is an account system that's going to reward the player for accomplishments. So the longer they play the game, the more they do, the more they accomplish, they'll keep getting these points added to their account. And in the event that their civilization gets wiped out, they'll be able to restart their civilization somewhere else in the universe and not be like starting over from scratch. They'll get like all these bonus points that they can spend to get themselves back up and running pretty darn close to where they were. There'll be a lot of ways to where, certain designs and patterns and things that they create will get stored in there. So in the event of an empire getting wiped out, that empire is gone. If everything is gone, the planets are gone, the people are gone, they're gone. But they can regroup somewhere else and start again without being like, hey, we just lost 5 years of gameplay. They'll be like, oh, okay, we're now somewhere else in the universe, but we're definitely not starting from day one. So we've taken into consideration all these different elements. You've got your first-person shooter style, your third-person shooter style, MMO style controls, your flight sim type controls, your simulation-oriented living beings, your real-time strategy commander, interface, and then on top of that, we're adding in the idea of how adventure games and platformer games allow players to navigate the world. One of the things that really, I love, like, for example, the Mario series, the Assassin's Creed series. I love being able to scale a building, climb up a wall and do all this kind of crazy stuff. But because we're producing a game with spherical worlds, there's no invisible walls, there's no, hey, look, it's a mountain, I can't climb that. We had to take into consideration that players need to be able to go anywhere and not get stuck, not be like prevented from going past this point. So we're even including a very, very interesting, and you guys are going to love it when you see it, system for allowing players, based on their species stats and their technology, to essentially traverse every plane, climb anything. It's an awesome system that we've developed, and I'm very proud of it. And I can't wait to see you guys using it. But to incorporate even that level of gameplay into Praetoria, it's like I said, it's a mixture of some of the best parts, specific parts, of all these different genres rolled together into one. I know some people will say, well, you got some pretty big plans here, but the one thing, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what makes a great game is not the complexity of the programming. It's not how many lines of code you've written. It's the end effect. It's what does the player actually experience. If you look at games over the years, most games don't even let you go from planet to planet in a spaceship, fly from the surface of a planet to space, let alone half the things we're trying to do. And instead of going the most complicated route about it, we've said, how can we accomplish this, and how can we make this happen and give the player the effect? Players have had to use their imagination for as long as I can remember. I mean, you just, like, even in Mass Effect, you can't, when you fly to a planet, you're literally an icon moving to a circle and hitting land, and then it switches to a cutscene, and then you're on a little boxed-in place. So players have had to pretend a lot over the years. We're just taking it and saying, how can we make these things happen? How can we give players this effect as best as we can and add to it over time and make it more robust. And we've already got, as you've seen from our demonstration video, we've already locked down almost all the core systems that you could possibly want to say, well, that's a pretty hard thing to do. Are you sure you can even do it? We've already done it. It's like, you know, the majority of the hard stuff is completed here. It's now, you know, we really need to hire some more artists and, you know, a few more programmers, some support staff, and the forward marketing for the, you know, and some of the back-end server technology and things for netcode. You know, that's some of the stuff that we need your help to accomplish. But the really weird stuff that you think would be the hardest part, we've already got done. That's the part, that's to us, was the easy part, was going through and designing some of these systems and getting them worked out. So, you know, I'm like, basically all this to say, you know, we're very excited about what we're doing, and, you know, just the prospect of playing in a game where almost anything will be possible. And the longer the game is developed, because we're not going with levels, because we're not going to be doing this concept of expansion packs and whatever, you know, the game will keep getting wider rather than taller. And it's just the concept here, if you follow me for a moment, a game like World of Warcraft is what you call a vertical progression system. You start out here and you keep going levels up this way. And when they add new content, they're tacking something onto the top. So essentially, they always have to one-up what they did last time, whether it's more complex boss mechanics or it's, you know, a new zone to explore, new levels, new gear. And we're going with a completely different concept. Our system has essentially a cap, a level cap at the beginning, and we're developing horizontally. So it's a horizontal progression system. And being a classless, skill-based game, that's the idea here, is we can keep adding more nodes of interaction to the game world, more points where the player can interact with something, where they can, you know, make something happen, whether it's being a musician or a TV reporter or a runner running their own galactic news networks, or, you know, piloting new kinds of technology and spaceships and all this kind of cool stuff. We're going to keep adding in a horizontal progression. So a person, you know, a new guild who comes into the game late will not be, you know, so far down the pipe that they can't compete with an empire that's been out for years. If a whole guild moves and they've got 1,000 players and another guild's got 1,000 players, you know, even though one's going to be farther along in their tech tree development, they should be able to at least have strategy being the deciding factor between who wins a fight. Because the tech trees will all have built-in balances with resistances, and, you know, if you go down a particular tech path, you're going to be building a civilization that has bonuses and drawbacks. And each type of technology will work that way to where it has its strong points and its weak points. You know, one of the questions asked this morning on our campaign was, you know, will ships actually be transported? You know, will troops actually be transported, like, for example, on D-Day? Will you be able to actually say, you know, okay, we've built these things, you know, how are they getting there? Is this going to be like a typical RTS where you're, you know, just sending all of them over and they're flying in this one big, you know, crazy ball over to the other side of the map? And the answer is yes, you're going to actually have carriers and cargo ships and transports. You're going to be sending your designs off to factories for mass production, a production line that then is going to be moving these objects into these transports and transporting them to the other side of the universe and deploying them and using real strategy and tactics in how you approach combat with an enemy. You know, because of the simulation level of things, cutting off a supply line, ammo, food, energy, communication networks, this is actually going to affect the other civilization's ability to wage a war. You know, a person who is a strategist is going to be able to take an inferior force and defeat a superior force based on using cleverness, using their wits. You know, the underdog can win. It's not purely a numbers game here. It's a strategy and tactics. It's a how do you approach war, hit and run, guerrilla combat, you know, full on, you know, orbital bombardment, strikes, and so on. These are going to be the deciding factors in who wins a campaign. So this is, this is just me, rambling here. I apologize if I've been a little disjointed, but I'm drinking my coffee. I'm just blown away by how well we've done in such a short time. I look forward to getting some media coverage. If any of you guys out there have friends who run some magazines or are editors or writers for these magazines, give us a contact. Be glad to give you an interview or whatever. But we had almost no coverage whatsoever on this so far. We've already raised $1,000 in the first day. That's fantastic. And I just wanted to basically say thank you and, explain some of the parts that, just really have, our team excited, and, some of the things that just, to me, stand out and say, this is why Praetoria is so different than other games out there. You're not going to see, mark my words, it's possible someone might go, hey, if that indie company can do it and they got this popularity, we can do it too. My bet is that no big company is going to jump on trying to create a game like this until we're successful. And once we have created this new genre, massively multiplayer online strategic simulation, there will be other companies who will try and jump in on this type of action. They'll say, hey, let's re-examine our playbook. Let's think about what we're doing here from a different perspective. Can we do that too? And hopefully you guys will remember, we're the originator of this idea. We're the guys who are putting it out and taking the risk, and hopefully with the great risk comes the great reward. And as an indie developer, we can actually go ahead and do that. And with you guys' help, and much love and thanks and kudos to everybody who's jumping on board and backing us. With your help, we will be basically the first to deliver a truly freeform sandbox sci-fi game that is oriented around what truly makes sci-fi. Now, one of the questions I'm sure people are wondering is, are we going with a hard sci-fi or sci-fantasy idea here? And this will be the last thing I talk about before I go ahead and close it up. About 47 minutes now. But one of our best kept secrets, I guess, so far, we haven't even published any of the information about it, but I'll talk briefly about it before we close up, is we're essentially making a sci-fantasy. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one, pure sci-fi can be a little bit tedious. It's fun, but at the same time it's limiting. And because we really want to let people create their own universes, if you look at a series like Star Wars, that's sci-fantasy. You look at a universe like Warhammer 40K, that's sci-fantasy. There is pure sci-fi out there, but historically, sci-fantasy is more popular. It's more freeform, it has more freedom in it. So to answer the question before it's even asked, will there be magic, the Force type stuff? Can you make a Jedi, if you would? The answer is, in a word, yes. However, it's going to come at a cost. We will have things like, for example, we have papers we will be publishing and explaining a lot of this stuff, but we're just still working out how we want to explain it. But I'll give you a really brief synopsis. We will have magic, supernatural, psionics, superpowers, cybernetics, symbiotes, and nanotechnology. That's a pretty big category there. And there's a lot to go into, and I'm not going to get into that today. That'll be coming in a future update. But just to let you know, these things are taken into consideration. We will be developing it, but it's all going to have a very risk versus reward concept. Because characters have a lifespan, because there is AI involved in a character, using these types of things will have drawbacks. Magic may come with, for example, reducing the maximum age of a character, a species. Using magic is going to be very taxing. What is magic in a nutshell? Magic is essentially the ability to draw upon the life force of something to affect the life force of something else. We're not going to be having, for example, don't expect to see like, a wizard or a mage running around shooting fireballs out of their fingertips all the time. And they're going to be doing that instead of using guns. Not going to happen. Can just tell you that right off the bat. Magic will be very low key. It'll be very much a unique take on how magic exists. and supernatural type stuff is going to be very, very, very different than what you're used to. Yes, we're going to allow it to exist because we don't want to limit it and say, no, it can't exist. You know, look at psionics, for example, the concept of mind over matter. You know, that should exist. It's sci-fi, you know, why not? But don't expect it to be, oh, look, you got a little mana bar and, you know, you can just put all these spells on your skill bar and just start throwing spells left and right and have no detriment. The more you use that stuff, you might actually go crazy. Your character may become like, you know, we're talking stock raving mad lunatic. The AI itself will become disjointed from reality. And these types of things will allow us to put these elements, these types of designs into the game, but at a cost. So players have to weigh the benefit of using it. You know, things like, you know, nanotechnology. What is the difference between casting a spell and using a nanotech weapon? Essentially, both are causing something essentially invisible to occur that affects the, you know, the other party. But again, it's not going to happen without a drawback. There's going to be that risk versus reward concept. So, you know, just to put that out there. Yes, this is going to be a sci fantasy. There will be these kinds of elements potentially existing, but don't expect them to immediately trump technology. Don't say, oh, well, you know, because so-and-so is a magic user, they're overpowered, they're super powerful. You know, if you be the magic user if you want. Somebody nukes your planet, you're gone. What good did your magic do you? So, you know, everything's being taken into consideration. We've balanced out the ideas. We've agreed that it should exist, and we've developed systems that will allow it to exist. But it's all going to be very, 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 very low key compared to what you may be used to. So I hope that kind of, you know, answers that question before anyone even asks it. You know, this is, like I said, will be a sci fantasy. There will be those types of elements in, but you can expect to see something unlike you've ever seen before as far as how it actually works. So anyway, I just want to go ahead and close it up now and say, you know, thanks everybody. Once again, just a little shout out to Tor, Andre Kilmuckervold, Max, Kelly, Emmanuel Casenes, Mark Quayle, KRM398, Argrar, William Cooper, Justin Stansel, The Pink Ninja, Jonas Atterbring, Carlos Marquera, Joshua Johnson, Disoriented Effigy, Wayne G, Winter Wunsch, Martin Zanemarowski, Vaz, Craig O'Neill, and Becky Walker for backing us so far. You know, you guys are awesome. We love you. You know, thanks for making us feel, you know, like this is really going to take off and go somewhere. And just to remind you once again, until the 20th, anyone who makes a donation, you know, backs us basically, is going to have their reward level immediately increased by 1. So that's roughly 48 hours, a little bit less. You know, that's our way of basically saying thank you. We appreciate you guys taking that leap of faith right at the beginning. And, you know, we look forward to presenting you with a game experience unlike anything before it. And we hope that you will stick with us and tell your friends and get as many people involved in this as you can. You know, we've got great things planned, and we hope you enjoy. So thank you very much. And until next time, this is Alaric with Invisionary signing off.